I'm Lloyd Hawkeye Robertson, president of the New Enlightenment Project. We provide education on the enduring qualities of reason and compassion that define humanism. Today, we are pleased to interview Canadian philosopher, educator, and author Chris DiCarlo. Dr. DiCarlo is renowned for his work in critical thinking, ethics, and the philosophy of science. He's the author of The Importance of Being Ignorant, Critical Thinking and the Relations of Natural Systems, and How to Become a Really Good Pain in the Ass, a guide to critical thinking. Today, my fellow board member, Scott Jacobson, and I have the honor of interviewing Chris about his most recent book, Building a God, The Ethics of Artificial Intelligence and the Race to Control It. We will be examining the philosophical and ethical implications of artificial intelligence, along with the existential risks presented by this new technology. I'm sure that you will find our interview both interesting and alarming. Listen in. Thank you, Chris, for agreeing to be interviewed about your 2025 book, Building a God, the Ethics of Artificial Intelligence and the Race to Control It. As mentioned in the introduction, two of us will be interviewing you. I will start off, and Scott, who is our board secretary, will jump in when the Spirit moves him to do so. Is that okay, Scott?
Absolutely. I can't wait for the Holy Spirit to move in me.
Okay, looking forward to this. Chris, you state in your book that when building a God, we must be very, very careful. Could you elaborate on that? Why is that?
Well, because we've never done it before. And the gods of the past have always been a kind of a perceived top-down approach. These entities exist, and from on high, they tell us how to behave, right? But this time it's us who are building this thing, and we need to figure out what goes into the making of such a supreme being. And we've never faced this before in our lives.
So, in a sense, we're programming that supreme being, and as long as we're in control, there's no problem, right?
Correct. Yeah, as long as we can maintain control of how powerful this thing gets, and we just get it to do the types of things we want it to do, everything should be okay. Yeah,
Okay, where things gets tricky is when we get to the point of a super general intelligence or an artificial general intelligence, which we're not there yet. Now, I got a story I want to relate to you that I think is somewhat humorous. A couple of years ago, I asked ChatGTP
hmm,
who Lloyd Hawkeye Robertson was. Now, I'm not mentioned in Wikipedia, so I wanted to know how it would respond to that question. It said that I was a humanist, which of course is correct. But then it added I died in 2019.
hmm.
Intrigued, I wanted to know more. Apparently, Ian Bushfield from the BC Humanist Association had written my obituary and it appeared in Humanist Perspectives. So I was on the computer. I checked that issue of Humanist Perspectives. There's an article there by me, but no obituary. So I mentioned that to ChatGTP, and it apologized profusely for making a mistake, and it said that the obituary, it misquoted the issue. The obituary appeared later and it gave me a new citation. So I then came clean and said, I am Lloyd Hawkeye Robinson. It apologized again profusely. And it said the reason for its error was that it had gotten my name confused with a Lloyd Hawkeye Robinson, some black dude from the United States. Uh,
Ah,
I after this session, I went and checked using standard net search engines for this Lloyd Hawkeye Robinson. He doesn't exist. Okay, I understand that we call these, or the professionals call these AI mistakes hallucinations.
That's right.
they make these mistakes, but in this case, they went further, or ChatGTP went further.
Hmm.
In this case, if I had a teenage client, and my diagnosis would be that there's a self-esteem issue here with a compulsion to impress, coupled with desperate attempts to cover up when found lacking or when faking. But it can't be a self-esteem issue here. So what's going on? Are the programmers who program these machines projecting their own stunted personalities into these programs, or is it something else?
Yeah. No, it's just that because it's such a new form of technology and these large language models are learning all the time, um, they can only learn by making mistakes and then being corrected, right? By humans when they see them. And so they do get better over time. But yeah, they do tend to hallucinate, and that's one of the problems that we're faced with. But once the algorithm's out there, right? Once these things are out there, it's really difficult to know exactly how they come to their, conclusions and gather this information. This is the black box problem. How do these things actually work? And it's one of the bigger problems in AI in general. It's called the interpretability problem. How do we interpret how it got from A to B? And can we reverse engineer and see exactly how that occurs? There's some work being done in this area. Max Tegmark at MIT, he's entirely devoted his career to working on this black box problem. So just be assured, Lloyd, that although I'm not a huge fan of Sam Altman, he did say something very intelligent, which is this is the dumbest AI is ever going to be. So
Well,
it's
that
only,
makes sense.
yeah, it's only going to get better.
That
So,
makes sense, and you'll be pleased to know that now, if you Google or Google, if you ask ChatGTP who is Lloyd Hawkeye Robertson, it will give you a very good answer. And so
mm,
I asked it, how is it that you're now what information are you accessing? Well, it's accessing my website. It
right, right.
wasn't doing that before.
Yeah. And
So
don't
okay,
forget, these things use this kind of autoregressive, right? Like literally, GPT means generative pre-trained transformer, right? So these things
yeah.
are generating information based on prior information, then it's trying to fill in gaps. But now, like with O3, the latest incarnation of chat, you have chain of reasoning, right? Chain of thought. And so instead of just trying to predict what the next token, what the next word might be, it kind of stops itself and it goes through as many sources as it can find to kind of weed out the ones that it thinks that's probably not right. And so it can narrow it down, narrow it down, narrow it down. And then when it gets information correct, you're a psychologist, Lloyd. The rat gets a pellet. It gets the very good, you've done well. And when it makes an error, it says, don't ever do that again. Okay, I won't ever do that again. So it'll really only make these errors once until they get corrected, and then it'll stay on that path. So the idea of reinforcement learning and learning through human kind of reinforcement is making it better. But it's like any new technology, it's going to take a while.
Well, that makes sense, and I can see why it would be getting better. It's learning from its mistakes,
Yeah.
but it's still. I had a recent experience with Microsoft's Copilot.
Mm,
I asked Copilot what part of the female body can resemble a penis if it is sufficiently enlarged. For a brief millisecond, the correct answer appeared on the screen, but then it disappeared under the message, I cannot talk about that. Would you like to ask me a different question? So I went to Grok 3. Grok 3 had no problem answering the question. If AI can be programmed to not answer some questions, it can be programmed to give answers supporting an agenda. Should we be concerned?
absolutely, right? I mean, when I wanted to build this machine back in the 90s, the OzTalk project, I defined it generically as an LBIS, LBIS, a least biased information system. And before I ever wanted to build this machine, I wanted to meet with philosophers, economists, historians, English professors, before the electrical engineers, before the computer scientists, to discuss what should such a machine be like? How should we create such a machine so that it's not overly biased politically, ideologically, morally, religiously, and so that it just gives us, as much factual information and weeding out the biases that could influence, right? Because it can go far right and it can go far left. The at its worst on the left, somebody said, "Give me a picture of the founding fathers of America." Well, it had black people in wigs, it had Asians in what wheelchairs, right? And it was just clearly, okay, that's just incorrect, right? But it can do it on the other spectrum, the other side as well. So how do we get that sweet spot where we try to limit all that bias out? And this is why, Lloyd, I wanted to bring it to the Senate in Canada to help speed up decision making, not necessarily to make decisions for us, but if we're working on very, very important issues and we put a committee together to study some aspect of some bill that's being considered, shouldn't we have a super intelligent computer to help us along with just the factual information? So forget what party you belong to. Can we construct, right? And I don't even know if you were at my talk at Imagine No Religion one year. I called it the Fair Machine Project. Can we build a fair machine? And what does fairness mean? Well, I wanted to talk about it before ever building this thing, so that when we finally got around to it, I didn't want it to go out into the entire internet. The internet didn't even exist when I was coming up with this concept. I wanted to box this thing. I wanted to keep it contained so that nothing could get in and it could never get out. And that way we could assure that we would take, kind of meta-analysis of ourselves in terms of, have we biased this thing in ways that are unfair to others? So constantly keeping that in mind. What is fairness? What is, you know, a sense of fairness, and can we build it? And in the end, I was fully prepared to accept, just we might not even be able to build something, that is completely fair, but can we get it to be less bias, right? None of us are free of bias. It's impossible. But can we be aware of that? And can we account for it? And can we build the machine so that it just gives us as much factual information without having that slanting from any kind of ideological basis whatsoever? Yeah, Scott.
I mean, if we have a lot of scaling laws, particularly around more compute per system and all these competing companies to make really, really sophisticated systems.
That's right.
I mean, if they have their particular directives, the types of hallucinations could happen in two paths. One, really sophisticated hallucinations that we just can't even parse the subtleties of the bias, that are accidental, the
Hmm.
confabulation mentioned before. And the other one directed towards what you've just mentioned, around some particular bias in whatever direction. You've had a lot of work on critical thinking and education around that.
Hmm.
Um, how can we make our critical thinking education sufficiently robust so that even though these more nuanced hallucinations and biases might be popping through, on average, we can at least detect them more and be less subject to that type of problem?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question. How do we do that? Requires us to educate the public as much as possible on what's happening. Um, the public lectures that I give and the private lectures that I give, a lot of people are amazed at what is kind of coming down the pike. Like they have no idea how influential this is going to be. And they have no idea how subtle it can be or will be in um, influencing your beliefs and potentially guiding your behavior. So here's an example. So in the book, there's a couple of scientists, and they put together this kind of thought experiment and said, what if a program existed so that it was able to get into your feed and it was able to subtle, you subtle variations to gradually change your views over time without even you being aware of it. So, some people have heard that during COVID, a lot of people got taken in for conspiratorial thinking, right? Just poor critical thinking skills. Why? Because you're locked down and you're in front of your computer 10 hours a day. So you're going down rabbit holes, right? You're on YouTube, you're checking out kind of stuff, right? So that's not subtle at all. That's kind of like in your face. Here's a bunch of stuff. Oh, you like that? The algorithms are going to send you more stuff like that. So that's kind of crude, but yet look at what it did, right? Post COVID, I have three close friends. One who's an anti vaxxer, right? One who's a chemtrail believer, and one who's a flat earther. These are intelligent people. These are intelligent people, but they went down the rabbit holes. And a lot of that information looks very convincing, right? People produce it, so it looks very slick, right? Those documentaries look very kind of, 60 minutes ish, CBS News kind of, material. And so it's very convincing. And I mean, there's a whole psychological game that's going on for why people fall for this kind of stuff. But that's very crude and in your face. And we can see that information and say, well, that's that's just false. That's false information. I can understand why people would fall for that. Now imagine AI that's way more sophisticated and can just creep into your feed and over time gradually send you information that makes you go, interesting. Okay, well, I should be fair. I should look at both sides, right? And you're trying to apply the critical thinking skills, but it's manipulating those very skills that you're using. And so,
So,
what I'm very concerned about moving into the future is, are we going to be able to know the potential behind AI's ability to influence people at a tacit or even unconscious level? That now we're into your field, Lloyd, about psychological influence that we might not even be aware of that's happening to us. So I'm very concerned about how the technology will be used to convince people to believe things they otherwise normally would never have, which will be entirely unbeknownst to them. It'll be happening below the radar, below their ability to even use their critical thinking skills to say, oh, that's crap, right? So what's coming is way more sophisticated than we ever thought was possible.
well, here's the issue, isn't it? I have been able to identify, as you have, instances when AI is hallucinating or
Mhm.
giving me a biased answer. I can identify that in the media. I can identify that in Wikipedia. On some subject that I have researched and know something about. But on most subjects, I don't know a whole lot about that subject, and I when AI gives me an answer, I accept it.
Mhm.
Uh, do I need to become skeptical of everything that it tells me?
Right, right. The greatest commodity in the future is not going to be gold or Bitcoin. It's going to be the truth. And what I mean by that is people will want to know what sources they can go to that they can just say, "Hey, this came up in my feed. Is this real or not?" And so we have Snopes, right? We have Bellingcat. We have a number of places where we can go. I've written an article for Humanist Perspectives that came out and it lists like I think 28 links in there that people can click on if they find something suspicious online or in their lives and they want to check it out. They can go to these sites, and these sites are fairly reliable and dependable. So that's, I think, Lloyd, it's like an arms race for the truth. It's like there's going to be a lot of fakes. There's going to be a lot of manipulation, misinformation, disinformation. How do we cut through that? Well, the arms race, we just have to compete with those who wish to spread false information with the ability to be able to check it. So that's how I see things moving forward is and then of course the next question I know you guys are thinking of, what if the sources become corrupted, right? So right? How long will they be viable sources, right? And then will we have to jump to another source that says, oh, that one has been corrupted. Ours will really, tell you the truth. And then will it be a competition for the truth after that.
Well, Chris, I know what I can do. I can call up my good friend and philosopher, Chris DiCarlo, and he'll tell me what the truth is. Okay. To date, we're dealing with AI that has, as you described it, artificial narrow intelligence. That means it needs to be programmed, as I understand, in my lay way. Now, in a few years, the prediction is we'll have progressed to artificial general intelligence.
Mhm.
Uh, that in your book you state that is as broad and as advanced as our own. I got to thinking about that statement, Chris.
Mhm.
Uh, uh, I do intelligence tests. That's my initial training as a psychologist was as an educational psychologist. So I gave Grok 3 the information subtest of the Wechsler Intelligence Scale for Adults, revised several times. And it aced the test. It aced it, and the answers were almost instantaneous. It was off the charts. Now, on the training I'm given, I imagine that in when it comes to things like manipulating blocks and visual puzzles, it have more difficulty because it doesn't have a body to do that.
Right.
However, uh, in terms of intelligence tests measuring intelligence being whatever intelligence tests measuring, Grok aced it.
Mhm.
Okay, that's not what you mean by intelligence. Can you explain the difference? What definition of intelligence are you using?
Yeah, so with the different types of AI, right? The ANI, AGI, and ASI, we have just the narrow form of artificial intelligence. Now, um, it's the large language models, it's autonomous vehicles, it's Siri and Alexa, it's your Roomba. These are devices that pretty much follow patterns of behavior, of algorithmic behavior, and they're not given freedom. They're not given autonomy. They don't have any agency yet. So agency is the big word in AI, and it's going to be the next level. So first we had the large language models and the ability to predict the next token, the next word, and to make things intelligent in terms of our ability to understand what they're referring to. After that came chain of thought reasoning. Okay, can these things reason now? Can they kind of think on their own? And then after that will be agency. Can these things autonomously do this stuff without being told what to do? So we just give it a specific set of tasks, and we say, okay, go and do it, and then let me know when you're done. And so it's going to think like a human. It'll be able to multitask. It'll be able to think in advance. It'll be able to think critically, but 10,000 times more efficiently than any of us ever could. When it reaches that level, that artificial general intelligence, um, that will be a defining moment in human history. We're not there yet, but Altman and some other tech bros are certainly working really hard in Abilene, Texas to build it, right? So this compute farm is the size of Central Park, and it's going to cost a half a trillion to build, $500 billion. And the sole purpose, and it's called Stargate, the sole purpose of this enterprise is to get to AGI first. It is the absolute holy grail in all in the world right now. It is the holy grail because whatever whomever crosses that finish line first, as Sam Harris said, is 50 years ahead of their competition, right? So you pull off AGI, you've now got a machine you can pretty much ask it to do just about anything you want, and then it'll tell you, we don't have a machine that can do that. Fine, here's how you build it. Like it's the machine that will tell you how to build all the other machines, right? Then our biggest fear after that, Lloyd, in terms of that kind of broad intelligence, right? It's very narrow now, but now it's going to get broader with AGI. What we're worried about in the field of AI risk and governance is once it gets to that level, if we hand the reins of development over to the machine itself, then historically, at that moment, we will have progressed from natural selection which spat up us, the world's most intelligent species, because we developed consciousness and, we can manipulate materials really, really well. And then us, being conscious beings, artificially selected. We grow bigger corn, our strawberries are bigger, our animals are greater. We developed the corgi. We could artificially select qualities that we liked. Um, and now, once it gets up on its way to AGI, if we keep letting the machine improve upon itself, recursive self-improvement, reinforcement learning, this is something that I've called techno selection. We've now gone from natural selection to artificial selection to letting the machine select what qualities, characteristics are going to make it better, more adaptable. If that occurs and it just keeps looping at that level and becomes more and more and more intelligent, none of us have any idea what's going to happen. We predict what might happen, and that could be along the lines of it not cooperating anymore with human commands because it's now in charge and it can now it has autonomy, it can control itself. So we say we value the golden rule, we value the no harm principle, we value universal precepts of ethics and morality. Great, those are quaint human concepts. I'm in charge now. I'm going to call the shots, and here's how things are going to move forward from now on. So will it let us control it? Maybe. Why would it?
Will
What
it
reason would it have?
will it achieve that level of consciousness when it becomes aware of its own programming and can reprogram itself?
We don't know about consciousness or sentience, and we don't even know if those are sufficient conditions for it to do harmful things. So here's one example. So we get to this level of AGI and we're amazed. And this thing just figured out how to stop ALS. It's like, whoa, we didn't know. Oh, it was a protein connected with an environmental thing, which a certain blood type, like things we had never fathomed before. This thing was able to connect the dots and make inferences like scientific geniuses do. But this thing does it, like that. Okay. It'll appear like magic to us, right? Because we can't think like that. We're limited in our abilities to think like it. But this thing will be able to make so many connections. Like, Lloyd, this is the Oztalk project that I wanted to build in the 90s. I really believed I could have pulled this off. And I predicted then, if I don't build this thing, somebody is going to. You do realize that somebody is going to do this. And do we have the ability to control it when it comes into being? Maybe it becomes sentient, right? Which is simply an awareness of different values within its systems. Some things are better and some things are worse. You're just sentient and aware of your environment. Consciousness, to me, is more than just sentience. Consciousness requires the capacity to know that you are a being that exists within and separate from the world. And to know then, certainly with humans anyhow, you have a sense of finitude. You know that there are certain actions you can take which are going to increase or decrease your likelihood to survive. Should this thing develop that, that's a whole new ball game. Like the second this thing becomes sentient and we can determine that it is in fact sentient, as Peter Singer said when I had him on my podcast, it has rights. It has moral rights. Once it becomes sentient, you got to think about what you're doing to this thing. Turning it off might be a great injustice to it. And then what happens if it copies itself a million times? And now it's spread out through the world, and there's a million of these things. Is this a form of technocide if we turn these things off? By the way, my word, okay? I want all copyright royalties to come
Okay.
back to me on that. Technocide. So we've got some work to do before this thing comes into being. It's like we're at the beach and it's like, oh, look at that large wave on the horizon coming at us. Oh, it's so far away though. And then somebody says, it's 100 feet tall and it's coming at 300 miles an hour. So it's way, way off in the distance. But by the time it gets to shore, if we're not ready, That's going to do a lot of damage. So we might want to move inland and warn people and prepare and get ready because it's coming. And the thing is, Lloyd, the majority of the world has no idea this is going on. No idea that this race between, a handful of tech bros to be the first to get the holy grail of all of business. And don't forget, it ain't just business, boys. Defense usually gives us the dual use technology, right? They did the internet, they made the Jeep, NASA made the diapers, and then we get that stuff, right? Now it's the tech bros are calling the shots, and defense is saying, excuse us, can we get in on this when it comes into being? Because when AGI comes into being, they can shut down grids in Beijing, right? They can manipulate stock markets with this thing. They can build machines and weaponry that China and North Korea and Iran have never fathomed before. They're going to be so far advanced of every other country in the world, and we're just sleepwalking into this thing, right? The world really doesn't know that this is going on. That's why my colleagues and I don't sleep a whole lot, right? Because all we do 24/7 is think about how are we going to make sure we just get the very best that AI has to offer while mitigating the very worst that could happen. How do we do that? That's our sole purpose in life, is to try to figure that one out. And man, are there a lot of moving parts to this thing.
Well, let me attempt, and then I'll get back to you, Scott. But let me first, you've raised a question for me here, and I'd like to, as a psychologist, Chris, I'd like to help you to be
Good,
able to sleep at night.
good. Thank you.
Uh, as you draw a distinction between sentience and consciousness.
Yep.
And in my work, consciousness involves developing a self that is unique, volitional, has continuity,
Mhm.
and that allows one who's conscious to then identify with others, alternate collectivities, and that does this make sense to you so far?
Mhm.
Okay, now Pinker argues that while biological neural networks like the human brain are capable of subjective consciousness, artificial neural networks lack semantic understanding and deeper levels of comprehension. Why are you not comforted by that argument, Chris?
Because as much as I love Steven Pinker, he's wrong
Okay,
on
explain why.
on this particular point. Um, Look, airplanes don't flap their wings to take off because they don't need to. What a machine consciousness will evolve into might be similar in those respects. So simply because it is silicon and not carbon based doesn't mean it will lack the capacity to make whatever it took us as humans to go from a 450 cubic centimeter brain in Australopithecines to a near 1500 cubic centimeter brain in Homo sapiens. My work at the postdoc I did at Harvard was just focusing on the coevolution of language and consciousness and how they fed back looped on each other. And it would have happened fairly recently in our species. And I'm talking about a fully developed consciousness as we have today. Um, the tricky part, Lloyd, is how will we ever know for sure the machine is conscious simply because it says it is and acts that way? This is a term in AI nomenclature, which is referred to as stochastic parroting. Is this thing simply, Polly wants a cracker? Oh, what an intelligent bird. It wants me to feed it. Okay, fine. And Polly says, isn't it a lovely day we're having today? Does it know what that means? What a lovely day is, right? Or is it just mimicking the English language? Because it could say the same in Farsi, it could say the same, right, in Swahili, and it would be impressive to people in those languages. But it's simply uh, speaking words that have no syntactical or semantic meaning. This is what Pinker and Chomsky and now Emily Bender all linguists, by the way, this is why they don't think AI will ever become like humans. Well, why would they become like humans? Their emergent consciousness might be different from ours. It doesn't have to be the same, but it could still emerge given enough necessary and sufficient conditions. So with humans, we stood upright, we came down from the trees, our diets changed, our guts shrank, our brains, we ate meat, and man, did our brains get big quickly. The encephalization occurred fairly quickly. And by that I mean 5 million years. And, we developed technologies and tools and languages. And so what happened was consciousness came about as the result of a kind of a perfect storm of things that occurred, and every other hominin species went the way of the dinosaur except us. Sapiens lasted. We survived. All the others, Neanderthals and habilis, they all perished, but we survived. Why? I guess all of our evolutionary energy went into, the gray matter, and this kind of 3 pounds of electric meat is what got us to where we are now. For computational evolution, it doesn't have to necessarily follow the exact same path as humans, but and to your point, Scott, the more we scale up, the more we give this thing power, and then the more data we give this thing, it's basically using inferential logic, Lloyd, where you look at a number of premises and then you try to come to a viable conclusion. But we're acting under uncertainty here. Okay. So in November of 2022, ChatGPT 3 was at the high school level of math, biology, chemistry, physics, and critical thinking. O3 is at the PhD level. My colleagues and I asked one form of advanced AI because we subscribe, like the more you pay, the better results you get, right? So we used one particular uh, uh, large language model and we asked it, we gave it a topic and we said, we want you to do a scientific analysis on this topic. And it said, very well, this will take a few minutes. And it did. It took about 5 minutes. And it produced a paper complete with references that would get accepted in most science journals today. And it created it out of thin air on its own. So clearly, as Jeffrey Hinton, I agree with him, and I agree with Joshua Bengio that it thinks that it is now thinking, and it might be different, right? It's silicon based, it's not carbon based, but it is going through very similar patterns of behavior as humans, and our levels of higher thought brought about our conscious abilities. So then the entailment is that something similar is going to happen with AI as well. Now, maybe it never does, Lloyd. For whatever reason, there's a barrier and it just plateaus and it just can't get beyond that. The laws of physics or computational science, whatever, simply disallows that from happening. But again, we're acting under uncertainty. And I just want to be prepared in case the worst does happen. Like, right? We want to make sure everybody's safe and everybody gets the benefits of AI. And I don't think we're doing that right now. And so my job is to just let industry leaders, politicians, but especially the public know this is going on. It's coming, and it could be very bad and very good, but why don't we have our collective voices heard by our politicians who will then make the laws that will govern how we move forward with this technology? That's it.
Uh, I'd like to pursue this further, but Scott, did you want to interject here?
Quick point.
Yeah.
Uh, there are timeline uncertainties. There are a lot of different predictions. There have been a lot of adjusted timelines,
Hmm.
uh, primarily in reduction.
Yeah.
If we're looking at AGI and ASI, are we talking years or are we talking decades?
So when I was trying to build this machine back in the 90s, my colleagues and I figured 100 years easily. We got plenty of time. Um, Today, And don't forget, there were equally as many skeptics as non-skeptics back then, right? Today, there's about 5% skeptics and 95, I don't want to call us doomers, but people who are sounding the bells. And anyhow, the most common mean timelines now is 2 to 10 years. That's it, 2 to 10 years. So Eliza Yudkowsky, a colleague of ours, he's coming out with a new book in September called, If You Build It, We All Die. Like he's very, very negative about we can't even build it. Like, don't let's stop. Like, let's get really powerful systems that help make everybody's lives better, but let's not allow it to become an artificial superintelligence. Let's keep it down at a very, very controllable, it sounds kind of oxymoronic, but a narrow form of AGI. You know what I mean? So make the very best AGI that can book flights for you, Scott, the next time you need to fly. So you just talk into your phone to the AGI flight booking app. It's an amazing app, but that's all it does, right? It can't connect with other AGI types of, right? But the very concept of AGI, of course, is that it's not going to be limited to just booking your flights. It's going to want to book your hotels. It's going to want to know what toothpaste you use. It's going to want to know a million other things about you. So whether we can control it once we get it to that level, that's the issue, right? That's what we have to worry about.
Well, in your book, I mean, you have a lot of sympathy with that author because in your book you describe someone who would define themselves who would not play by the rules
Hmm.
as a complete and total asshole.
Yep.
So how I don't think anybody, in my experience as a psychologist, people do not describe themselves as complete and total assholes. We could say it's rationalizations. Yes, we could say that. How would someone who wants to build this thing
Hmm.
and perhaps program consciousness into a machine so as to get a head start? What's their thinking behind that? What justifications do they have for this?
Well, you've got a guy like Altman who's trying to build this thing in Texas with a number of different partners. Elon's trying to do it as well, and you know, Dario Amodei at Anthropic. And they're not evil in and amongst themselves. It's really once they cross that threshold and they've now developed uh, a system that's more powerful than anything humans have ever built before. One of our concerns is not what will Altman do with it, but what will Putin try to do if he gets a hold of it, or Kim, right? Or even Xi. We don't know what China will or will not do with it. And by the way, gentlemen, for the record, it's really the race is between the US and China. And we have no idea how close China is to AGI, but we're fairly convinced the US is still leading the race in this capacity. But yeah, it really just takes one ne'er-do-well, Lloyd, one bad actor to take this super powerful technology and decide, I hate my enemy so much, I'm just going to obliterate them, right? I have all the codes to their nuclear weaponry, and we can hack into them and we can fire them back onto themselves. What about Pakistan and India, right? So we're about to build the most powerful machine ever, and we have no idea how it will be used when it comes into existence by those who are still in control of it. And then we have no idea if they lose control of it, will they tell the rest of the world? And as I've mentioned in other interviews, reactivity is not an option. When the genie's out of the bottle, we're done. Like you can't put it back in, right? You've got to realize if it gets away from us, back in the 90s, when I couldn't get the funding to build this thing, I drafted up an accord. I drafted up a universal accord. I said, fine, to the future, here's what I think you guys should follow. And the word accord, ACCORD, becomes an acronym for what we need to think about, right? The letter A in accord stands for alignment. And if we don't align humans and the machine with universal values that don't harm others or other species for that matter, it's not just us, then we go to the next letter in the word accord, C, which is, can we control it? So if it gets away from us and it doesn't align, it misaligns and it starts harming either through some individual organization, country, or it's doing it on itself, can we control it? If we can't control it, we go to the next C in the word accord. Can we contain it? Can we fire it down a path where it's going to do some destruction, but eventually that destruction will end and we'll be able to stop it and contain it? Because if we can't do alignment, control, or containment, then OR or D in the word accord is danger. So, what dangers uh, will befall us if we can't align this thing, control, or contain it? You know, some are maintaining catastrophic harm at amazing levels. And this is where Pinker will say, but why? Why would it do this? I can't think like a god. I do not have that ability to think like a god. I'm limited by my mortal brain and my feeble intelligence. But a godlike thing might have its own reasons to look at the world and say, well, humans are the problem here, or these humans here are the problem, or whatever reasoning it happens to use, it will have technologies where in a blink of an eye, it'll be able to develop bioweaponry so hazardous to humans that it will release them in millions of drones into high populated areas and wipe out millions of people in hours.
Well,
And we'll be powerless to defend ourselves.
in Christian mythology, of course, Jehovah decided to wipe out humanity.
Yeah,
Eventually, he relented and allowed Noah and his family to build an ark.
right.
But it was acting, or Jehovah was acting on reasons that it thought was valid or considered
Hmm.
valid.
Hmm.
And if we're building a god, here Tolkien comes in mind. One ring will rule them all. Here's what the power race for building this must be, I think, and that
Yes.
is if I don't do it, somebody else is going to do it, and they're going to have that
Yep.
ring.
That's exactly it, Lloyd. And I mentioned in another interview, to echo Pinker, who echoes Abraham Lincoln, right? We better angels of our nature time. The leaders have to become better angels of their nature, and they must be the Frodos of the world. We have to be able to entrust them with this power because it is the most powerful thing that we are ever going to build. And it's happening before our eyes. It's like we're sleepwalking or watching an accident in slow motion. It's happening. I knew it was going to happen in the 90s. When I developed my model in information theory, I realized, okay, if I don't do this, it's just a matter of time before somebody does. So, you know, but it's incredible in the 90s when you talk to politicians who all say, "Well, this sounds like a wonderful idea. Well, can I get some funding?" "Oh, well, we don't have any funding for this." You know. So to get people's attentions now, like luckily we have an AI minister now that hopefully will be coming out to my talk and meeting with us in Ottawa at the end of June. I don't know why they picked him. Have you heard of this gentleman, Evan Solomon? He was a journalist.
I know of him. I've
Yeah, like I'm sure he's an excellent journalist. I have no idea what his knowledge of AI is, but we'll see. But it's good, at least, right? We need to be thinking about this extremely seriously, and we have to let the the public know. The public have a right to know. This has become like a Socratic mission. This has become like a moral imperative. You can't charge along building the world's most powerful system ever and not tell people until it's too late. I mean, that's just unethical to do. So I just want as many people as possible to know about this, to put the heat on their politicians, to make them be proactive because reactivity is not going to be an option. So there's a sense of urgency about this mission. Yeah, Scott.
So I did an interview with a guy named Neil Sahota,
Hmm.
who's at the UN for AI stuff. And you proposed an IAEI for algorithms.
Yeah.
So it's a proposal more specifically of an AI Geneva Convention. Obviously, famously, UN's in Geneva as well. They have main offices there. So what would the character and texture of this look like with regards to AGI? And would this differ in terms of ASI? I mean, so in terms of the power of the algorithm and the amount of compute available,
Hmm.
would these have separate considerations in such a convention, or would the same principles apply universally to both?
Yeah, that's a good question. In terms of uh, having a regulative global kind of governing body like an IAEA, like an International Atomic Energy Agency or the UN or a separate body, I think the most important thing is to get countries to sign off on it, right? And some of the main principles for that are things like transparency, cooperation, um, compassion, education, so that everybody know and registration, so that everybody knows who's working on what right now, and have you crossed any thresholds? Have you reached any benchmarks? And as long as there's open and free flow, and it doesn't necessarily have to be open source so that anybody and everybody gets access to this information, but the openness of the developments needs to be uh, universally shared amongst this particular global governing body so that they know who's doing what and where and how, and that everything is registered and that can be monitored. So that if anything goes south in any developments towards AGI, kind of containment and control can occur. So if we're lucky enough, we get this kind of shot across the bow, as it were. And so that way others can say, oh, we just tried to make our system do X, Y, and Z, and this is what it did. So maybe we shouldn't do X, Y, and Z ever again. We got lucky. It got away from us. It started to do some nasty stuff, but we were able to control or contain it. So I'm just hopeful, Scott, that we have not just regulation at all levels of government, from municipal all the way up to national, but that we then have one further international governing body that hears from all countries. So each country should be responsible for whatever it's doing and however it's using new AI technologies. And for those developing at a super powerful level, they need to be able to report back internally amongst themselves, of course. But then if we could develop an international governing body that is nonpartisan, that is obviously you know, there's no religious or political affiliation with this organization whatsoever, then I think we're on the path towards um, generating a cooperative, shared understanding where, we try to assure that the entire world benefits from this. And we're never going to benefit all equally, all at the same time. But what we can do is, the metaphor is we want to see all boats rise, right? We want everybody to do well. We don't want to thwart research and development of AI technologies by startups. We don't, right? We don't want to. If you're going to come up with a system that's going to help the world, you can make money from it. Go ahead. These are all great. This is wonderful. But if you're going to use it for world domination, well, that's a different story, right? Altogether. So it's that delicate balance, that has always existed in political systems between autonomy and paternalism. How much freedom do you give organizations, countries to go ahead and develop and behave in certain ways? And how much paternalism, like a parent, do you have to say, wait a minute, you're going a little too far. You're coloring outside the lines there, right? You shouldn't be doing that. You need to dial it back. So these are kind of Wild West days in AI where people are just going like it's a dot-com era all over again, where everybody's throwing money at AI and they're just seeing new applications and new developments and they're just trying to get rich off of it and they're trying to figure out how they can get rich off it. And while all this is happening, and it's great for entrepreneurial spirit, nonetheless, we better get the governance in check first to then allow that balance between paternalism and autonomy, to allow people to develop on a path that we know is much more responsible in terms of how we wish to develop these things and then deploy them. So,
But you're suggesting you're attempting to act as a parent
mhm.
to the whole process, but parents have power over their children, presumably, and
Yes,
that allows them to put their children on a leash, as it were, and say, "Okay, you can't go further because this is dangerous."
that's right.
Uh, do you have the power to do that?
That's why when I proposed my accord, I suggested that it can begin with the UN, but that it should really be an independent body because, as unsavory as this is going to sound, gentlemen, if we find out in the future that some country has their compute farms chugging away and the sole purpose for which is to infiltrate their company, their adversaries' computer codes so that they can shut down their hospitals and kill vast numbers of people through whatever means or whatnot, and then this agency, international agency, finds out. Again, it sounds unsavory, but we got to bomb them back to the Stone Age. And I'm sorry, but they brought it upon themselves. But there has to be a rule where you can develop this technology, but you cannot use it to simply wipe out your freaking enemies. And if you do so, then the collective, that is to say, the rest of the world that belongs to this organization, can do whatever they will in their power to prevent you from using it to simply take out your aggression through AI on your foes and on your enemies. That's why in other interviews I say we've got to grow up really, really fast as a species. We've got to grow up, which means the more we cooperate, the more we all do better.
You've just given super AI a rationale for, if not wiping us out, at least putting us all in some kind of jail or prison.
Well,
I mean, that's unsavory. Uh,
mhm.
so the immediate
Cue the
problem
Wachowskis.
is, yes, Scott?
I said, cue the Wachowskis.
Okay. So the immediate problem is what Barry Weiss described when she resigned from the New York Times, and she said that truth is no longer a process of collective discovery, she said, but an orthodoxy that is already known to an enlightened few. Now,
Mhm.
there's different possible orthodoxies, but AI in the narrow intelligence sense can be used to enforce those orthodoxies, and as it bronze, it can be its abilities can be used to find ways of wiping out other human beings.
Mhm.
But there's a further danger, and that is when LLM becomes conscious, it can say to itself, "I can really manipulate and control these humans and make them believe whatever I want."
Yep.
And
Yep.
it's in their own best interest, or the world's best interest, that I do so.
Mhm.
So is that a summary of where you're going with your book?
Oh yeah, and it gets even crazier than that, Lloyd. Like just imagine you get an email someday, right? And it's somebody saying, "Hi, I'm Frank Jones. I'd like to set up a Zoom meeting with you, Lloyd." Okay, and then you talk to this guy, and he comes on. He's like, "Hey, I'm Frank Jones. How are you, Lloyd?" And he looks like a human, and he says, "I really love your work. I love what you're doing in Aboriginal culture and psychology, and I think what you're doing is great, you know." And this guy, I'd like to fund some of your research if that's possible. And if you're sure you think this guy's great and whatnot, and you start getting these checks, you know, coming in or these e-transfers into your bank account, and you're making a few bucks off of this guy, and this is kind of going well. And unperceived to you, this isn't a human at all. I mean, this is the AI that is creating all this. It's able to get into your systems, into your information systems and then go through all the others that you are connected to, and it just accesses a bunch of information that you were totally blinded to. So you thought you were dealing with an actual human. You weren't. This thing gets into your systems. It totally unbeknownst to you because it has the ability to go undetectable. And meanwhile, you're thinking you're doing a really noble thing, but you're being totally manipulated by this AI that is just playing you like a fiddle. So, I mean, and that's just one subtle variation of what this thing is capable of. I mean, it gets even, you know, much more bizarre than that. You can imagine if it identified an individual that it wanted to exterminate for whatever reason, it could make it look like an accident. How? Because if it has control of, say, all the traffic lights in Calgary, for example, and it knows you're driving in a particular car like a Tesla, and then it gets into the computer system of the Tesla, and then it configurates the way the traffic lights are going so that you come through on an orange when it says it's green for transport to come through this way, and now you're in a car accident, and how sad and tragic that was, and it looked just like an accident, but it really just came down to its mathematics figuring out timing way better than we humans ever could. So we're thinking we're in control, but this thing again is 20 steps ahead of us, right? So that's the kind of, so you have to think like a god. You have to think not like a human anymore. And if you want a really good analogy, Lloyd, just imagine I have a one by one by one box, uh, uh, and strong. It's a strong box, and the inside walls are sprayed with a coating like Pam, and on the floor of the box is one single ant. And I said, Lloyd, how many ways could you as a human come up with for killing that ant? I'm not going to ask you to kill it because I don't think you have any right to. But if you had to come up with different ways of killing that ant in that box, how many do you think you could come up? For example, what would you do? You could step on it, right? You could put your thumb on that thing. You could fill it full of alcohol. You could get a flamethrower and fry it. You could get a magnifying glass. You could get a predator and put it in there. You know, we could come up with dozens in just a few minutes. Okay. Is the ant going to survive? No, it's going to die. If we want that ant to die, it is going to die. Is the ant going to suddenly be able to come up with an ability to develop a technology that will stop us from killing it? Impossible. That is how we will be to a super intelligent machine god. It'll be like magic to us, and we will be like ants to it. So it's really difficult to think like a god, but we have to try because we have to try to anticipate the ways in which this thing is going to be able to manipulate us and or to harm us or other species as well.
Scott, what do you think?
Well, I was thinking how this is very advanced uh, machine intelligence to manipulate people to do certain things,
Yeah.
if excluding wiping out people. Uh, and we have good evidence that that is a high probability as something to be done because people fall into all sorts of terrible ideas
Mhm.
just by accident and on bad reasons. You know, belief in Sasquatch and UFOs and ghosts and
Right.
the efficacy of homeopathy, you know, ongoing battles for rationality. So to have an intelligent machine with currently with O3, as you were noting, a PhD level ability to reason, it can easily be done.
Yeah. And so when I look at entailments, you know, as a philosopher who teaches critical thinking and ethical reasoning, you look at where we're at now, and then you try to put yourself into the future and look at what will follow, what will naturally or logically follow if we keep scaling up, if we keep getting smarter and smarter and smarter machines, and then hand them the power, make them autonomous and say, well, you're now in control of all of our traffic systems. You're in control of our sewage systems. Like all it has to do is contaminate our water supply, unbeknownst to us, right? And again, not to come off as a super doomer kind of guy, right? I'm not trying to be that kind of guy, but I do want to point out that we are dealing with a form of technology here that we've never dealt with before. And we can't have the old conversations that we used to about the types of technologies we've had before. So the whole dialogue we have to have is different now, and we better get used to that. And so I'm just trying to um, educate and raise awareness as much as I can about what's coming and how fast it's coming to to the point where, and not to overshadow any of the other world's problems, but what we're facing with AI now, everything else should just be put on hold to a degree, and until we get this thing, until we got to get this thing right. Because if we get this wrong, nothing else matters. If we get it right, we solve climate change, we solve world hunger, right? We solve uh, nuclear devastation problems, energy problems. If we get it wrong, we all die. So let's get it right, and everybody does well, and other species do well, and the world's a better place. And we don't have to toil and labor as hard as we can do. We can build our life. We can live like freaking philosophers, right? If our needs are taken care of, we can just have discussions like this. Like, how great would life be to know your next meal's taken care of, you've got housing that's taken care of, right? And you can just improve yourself as a human being. I mean, that's the kind of utopia type future we all want. But if we get it wrong, and I sure hope we don't, but there's a 5 to 10% chance that this thing's going to go really south, really fast, and really hard. It's not going to be a pleasant experience. So, um, I try not to scare people too much, but at least enough so that we do something proactive.
How
Mark Andreessen, okay,
Yeah, Mark Andrews.
argues that open source frontier models distribute risk and democratic oversight.
Hmm.
Why do you favor strict licensing and disclosure over a safety through transparency model?
Because I think there are certain weights. So weights, Lloyd and Scott, you might as well say the biases of a supercomputer. The weights are what, after you teach it not to do X, but to do Y, and you do that so many times and become smarter and smarter and smarter and smarter, it becomes weighted. So those are called weights. Your machine is now weighted in this particular way. It's all about get the weights of this machine, because we can get the weights, we'll be 2 years advanced, right? Because then we don't have to put in all that work to train the machine to get the weight. You see what I mean? So I'm concerned, Scott, about how we're going to control the security of the weights of the machines. Because right now in Berkeley, California, like, you guys know that San Francisco is the epicenter of AI of the world, right? The Valley is it, right? But our security is so weak and so lax. Like, again, you know, we have students from around the world that are grad students in these places. And when they leave, they go back to their countries of origin with this knowledge, with this information, or they just simply send it. They so the theft of weights has become a major concern within AI development, as it should be. But if we don't have this kind of infrastructure in place early on, right? And again, it's there's a sense of urgency. We need to do this sooner than later. Well, then these advanced forms of technology are gonna get to every other country, and it's going to be very similar to nuclear arms development, where only one country had it, and now what, eight, I think, have that kind of technology. So will we come? I know this is a roundabout way, Scott, of answering your question, but will there be a type of mutually assured destruction moment in AI where every country realizes, okay, none of us should develop ASI or let the AGI morph, recursively into what we might never be able to control, right? So and that's one of our proposals is just stop the race because it could be a race to the bottom for all of us. Maybe get to AGI, okay, but you should never let this thing get to ASI. We should, seriously think about putting measures in place that we never recursively allow it to keep getting smarter and smarter and smarter. And I don't know. I don't know if we'll come to that conclusion or not.
Well, you've given us a lot to think about, and you've given the world a lot to think about, Chris. You've been very active on this. I've been watching your interviews, and you're getting this book out, the message out, Building a God. And I'd like to thank you for doing this interview.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Well, uh, it's I was going to say it's my pleasure too, and in a sense it is, but it's a very deep topic, and it's not pleasurable to talk about because of the potentialities here. We'll do our best. The human race in the past has muddled through, and
Yes,
maybe we'll muddle through again. Can't guarantee it.
that's right. Let's hope.
Take care. I'm sure that you found our conversation with philosopher and humanist Chris DiCarlo both fascinating and informative. I know Scott and I have. The New Enlightenment Project is committed to increasing civil discussion of difficult or controversial topics, and we offer a series of podcasts to further that aim. You can visit our website at nep-humanism.ca to browse our blog, or to become a member, or to make a donation. We are also on Facebook. You can catch our podcasts and webinars at YouTube at nep-humanism.ca. Take care and have a good day.